So when you think about exercise, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably muscles, right? Or maybe your heart and lungs. But what about the very framework that holds you all together? Today, we're going to dive deep into our bones, some of the most amazing, living, and dynamic tissue in your entire body, and explore how they dramatically adapt to every single move you make.
All right, to really get a handle on just how dynamic our bones are, let's start with a really fascinating puzzle from outer space. You know, when the first astronauts came back to Earth, they were in peak physical shape, but doctors noticed something pretty alarming had happened to their skeletons.
They had lost a huge amount of bone density. We're talking as much as 20% in some cases. And that discovery revealed a fundamental truth about our bodies. Bone is a use it or lose it kind of tissue. In the zero gravity of space, there's no stress, so the body gets the signal to weaken the bone. But, and this is a good part, the reverse is also true. Down here on Earth, we can use that exact same principle to make our bones way, way stronger.
So how does that even work? Well, to figure that out, we need to look inside the bone. Because it doesn't just get denser with exercise, oh no, it actually changes its internal architecture in a ridiculously cool way.
Okay, so every single bone in your body is basically made of two types of tissue. On the outside, you've got this hard, dense shell called compact bone. But deep inside, that's where the real magic is happening. It's called spongy bone, and well, it looks exactly like it sounds.
This spongy, honeycomb-like structure is made up of these tiny, interconnected supports called trabecula, which is just a fancy way of saying little beams. And believe me, their arrangement is anything but random.
In fact, your body is an absolutely incredible architect. These little beams are perfectly aligned along the lines of stress your bones feel every single day. They create this dynamic internal scaffolding that is constantly remodeling itself to handle the specific forces you put on them. It's amazing.
So the big question is, how does the scaffolding know how to change? Well, it all comes down to force. And to keep things simple, we can break all those forces down into two main types, a push and a pull.
So our bones are constantly being pushed or squeezed by what are called compressive forces. You know, things like gravity or the impact of your foot hitting the pavement. And at the exact same time, they're being pulled and stretched by tensile forces. That's what happens when a muscle contracts and literally yanks on the bone it's attached to.
And this is where the design gets brilliant, because bone is basically this perfect composite material, made of two very different ingredients. You have a hard crystal-like stuff called hydroxyapatite to handle all that compression, and then you have this flexible, stringy protein called collagen to handle all the tension.
You know what it's like? It's kind of like reinforced concrete. The hydroxyapatite crystals give you that hard, compressive strength, just like the cement. But then you have all these collagen fibers woven throughout, acting like microscopic rebar, giving it this flexible tensile strength that stops it from being pulled apart.
Okay, so we've got the material science down. Now let's connect this directly to the exercises we actually do. How do we create that push and that pull?
Well, creating those compressive or pushing forces is pretty straightforward. Any kind of impact activity like walking, running, or jumping is going to do the trick. And we create the tensile or pulling forces with resistance training, like when your bicep contracts and literally yanks on your arm bone during a curl.
But here's the really cool part. You don't actually need to plan separate exercises for pushing and pulling. Because of the way our bones are shaped and loaded, most activities are super clever. They apply both forces at the same time.
So picture this. When any of your long bones are loaded, doesn't matter if it's from the impact of a run or the weight of a lift, it experiences this tiny, microscopic bending. And this simple action is incredibly efficient. It puts the outer edge of that curve under tension, while the inner edge gets squeezed under compression. One movement, two powerful bone-building forces all at once. Genius.
So we have the forces and we have the materials, but who are the microscopic workers that are actually responding to these signals and doing all the remodeling? Well, let's meet your cellular construction crew.
Your bones are in a constant state of turnover, and it's all managed by two main types of cells. First, you've got the osteoblasts. Think of them as the builders. They show up at stressed areas to lay down new bone. And then you have the osteoclasts, the breakers. Their job is to dissolve and clean up older damaged bone tissue. It really all comes down to balance. On a normal day, your builder and breaker activity is pretty much matched, so your bone density stays stable. But when you exercise, you fire up the builders to outpace the breakers, and your bone density actually increases. And in a no-stress environment, well, that's exactly what happened to the astronauts. The breakers took over, and their bone density dropped.
Now, this whole amazing process, the push, the pull, the builders, the breakers, it's regulated by a ton of different things in the body, including our hormones. And that brings us to one final and really important thought to wrap this all up.
Okay, so we know that the hormone estrogen kind of acts like a brake on those osteoclasts. You know, the demolition crew. It slows them down. So thinking about everything we've just learned, what do you suppose happens to that delicate balance of bone density when a person's estrogen levels decline significantly over their lifetime? It's a critical question, and it's one that connects all this incredible science directly to our own long-term health.